Big shout out to our sponsors. Listeners, don't miss out on these amazing deals. Get 10% off Cyc Plus, the best e-pump on the market, and their other cycling products. 35% off Frey Skincare for skin that sweats. And 25% off Genki Wellness Nutrition Packages, all using the coupon code ZONE2SPEAK at checkout. Head to the podcast description for all the links and grab your exclusive discounts today. And now for the episode.
Nice to meet you. Lovely to meet you, guys.
You look relaxed. You're off season now. Yay, it's vacation mode.
This week to kind of like sort everything out in terms of like my bike room's currently a mess. I like need to unpack and things like that. So I'm doing a little bit of riding this week and then I'm not taking a bike. And I think I'm going away for 2 weeks. So that's going to be...
Wow. What do you mean you think?
Well, we've booked flights for a week, but I really want to extend it and make it 2 weeks. So I think it will be 2 weeks.
Where are you off to?
Cancun, Mexico.
Nice. Were you here just at Ponce for the Gravel Series final?
Yeah, I was just at Ponce. I came back 2 days ago. It was an adventure. It wasn't the best race. It was probably my worst race all season, which isn't how you want to end your season, but I finished, which was the important part. I abandoned the race and then I unabandoned the race, which I've never done before.
You do that? Wow.
Yeah, well, I guess I like by abandoning, I like called someone to try and pick me up, and then my rear wheel, like the brake was stuck on after a crash. So I literally couldn't ride. I was pushing so much power and not moving forward very fast, and it was completely jammed on. So I called someone to try and meet them, and I started riding towards them. And then my rear wheel became unlocked. So I was like, I guess I'm going to have to finish this race now.
Yeah. I was like, hey, this worked out. Let me keep going.
Yeah, I span back around and was like, I got to get back on the board so I can get racing again.
You're super resilient. I subscribe to your Patreon. I believe in supporting our fellow women. And for me, we got to also invest in ourselves that way too. And that's a way to share, give people inside view if they really are invested in you.
No, I think it's a great platform, and it's something that I want to use more and I want to put more time and effort into, because I think it's that element of like developing a community who are like really invested in what you're doing and being able to give people, that kind of better insight or like more insight. And like at the end of the day, you can like build sponsors and build those relationships, but something can happen internally in a business and suddenly you've lost that contract, and actually like having a community of people that support you, I think is probably more valuable in the long term in this kind of sport.
It's true. It's who sticks with you too from the beginning, who wants to see everything from the rides to the walks. It doesn't matter. It's what they're invested in, what you're doing in your life, and they're interested in you as a person too.
We can also share with others about anything and everything about cycling. I think everybody's curious about, for example, your journey, how you started cycling and where you are today.
What's kind of resonating with you, what's sticking in your brain this year that you want to share more of. It's like, this can be your recovery, because I know you struggle with that a little bit, right? Actually relaxing.
Yeah, this is why I had a holiday where I can't take my bike.
Yes. Oh my God, it's like forceful, right? You got to. So yeah, definitely extend that vacation. It's a must do. But with that, I want to do a little intro really quick. Okay, here we go. On this episode of Zone to Speak, we welcome the ever-inspiring and infectiously authentic Maddy Nutt. From Maddy's start in finance to her current gig as a pro gravel rider with the Ripple Collective, she's followed her passion for cycling and lends meaning to the importance of what enjoying the process looks like at every turn. Whether it's Maddy's expression of love for her bike or her love of good food, it all equals the same result: happiness. We all want that recipe and can't wait to hear her take on it all. So without further ado, let's welcome Maddy to the podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Zone to Speak podcast. We're your hosts, Debbie
and Juliana. Welcome, Maddy.
Hi, guys. That was such a nice intro.
Thank you. What you get from any kind of a post that we get to see of you is your humility and your authenticity. So tell us a little bit about your journey. What have been the takeaways and what's really sticking out for you in this past year?
So I've had like a bit of a very up and down year. I've had a bit of a roller coaster year, mostly health wise. So I started winter last year. In December, I got COVID really badly, and I was like on a sofa for 8 days, unable to do anything. And I think it was 8 days no cycling, and then I managed to kind of slowly get back. So my winter training was really put back by COVID, and I still went to Mauritius for a week training with a friend, and then on to Australia, and I did the Rattle Gravel race there. But I had absolutely no fitness off the back of that kind of bout of COVID. And then I came back from that, built up my fitness again, had like some of the like races of my life. Basically, I had like the race of my life in Kenya. So I did a training block in Rwanda with a friend, and then I went over to Kenya and I won my first ever, well, I say first ever, probably the only UCI gravel race I will ever win. I don't know, maybe one day I'll win another one, but definitely like the race of my life in Kenya. I was in the form of my life. And yeah, like incredibly emotional, cross finish line in tears, like just the most amazing day on a bike. My legs felt great. I cramped with 10K to go. They felt awful, but I managed to somehow, I was very lucky with the route. The route ended with a 10-kilometer descent. So I was very lucky that I cramped at the top of the last part, and I was able to just kind of wheel to the finish and like try not to touch the brakes because I couldn't pedal. But yeah, I won that race, and that was the absolute peak. And then the first stage of Migration Gravel race, which was following that race, the night before the first stage, I woke up in the middle of the night with sweats and a fever. And actually, Sarah Stern, I was racing Migration Gravel race, that she hadn't done the UCI race on that, like the few days before. She pulled out of it because she was ill. And we'd sat next to each other on the bus the day before that race. So I definitely caught her COVID, which she definitely had, which is why she didn't do that race. So we both did Migration Gravel race with COVID. I think quite a few of us at that point probably did have COVID. But yeah, so we both did that race with COVID. I would say knowingly, but I definitely didn't know it was COVID. I just knew that something was off. But I didn't feel awful until the last day of the race. So it was a 4-day stage race. Day 1, 2, 3, I felt okay. Like you're at altitude, so you're not feeling 100% anyways. And then day 4, I felt like utter rubbish. But it's day 4 of a stage race. That could be down to having 3 days of racing in my legs. But yeah, I came third at that. Sarah managed to win with COVID, which is quite impressive. Yeah, real kudos to her for that one. And then yeah, the day after the race, I was like shivering in Africa and needing like multiple layers. Food tasted weird, everything smelled weird, which is classic COVID for me. So yeah, kind of realized I had COVID. And then basically from doing that intense effort of 4-day stage race with a virus in my system, unknowingly I'd obviously have had some of the virus get into my heart, which I didn't realize. And then from doing the intense effort, I gave myself pericarditis, which I didn't realize until I then went and raced in Mexico. And I was really struggling when I was in Mexico, like feeling very sleepy, feeling really off, feeling really funny. My breathing felt a bit weird. Like I just felt just not my normal self. My chest felt really tight. And then I did a 240-kilometer race, gravel Mexico. And I'd say about halfway, maybe like 4 hours into the race, I had chest pain that I've never experienced ever in my life. And it was a bit scary, and I nearly tried to pull out of the race, but I was in the middle of the Mexican desert, so I kept going to the finish line. Also, it's kind of classic me story. Like I was in a podium position, I was too stubborn to like not continue, so I came second in that race. When I crossed the finish line, I like turned to people there and I was like, there's something wrong with my heart. Like I can feel that something's not okay. So I saw a cardiologist the next morning, and yeah, he diagnosed me with pericarditis. So I basically had an enforced mid-season 3 weeks of no exercise.
Wow. And what is that diagnosis? Sorry, can you tell us a little bit?
Pericarditis. So pericarditis is a less serious form of, well, it's its own separate thing, but there's myocarditis and pericarditis. Myocarditis is maybe the thing that is more commonly spoken about because it's more dangerous. So a lot of cyclists have had both pericarditis and myocarditis when they've had COVID and they've trained through it, or they've trained intensely with having had the vaccine. It can sometimes happen after you've had the vaccine because obviously you've got a little bit of the virus in your system. But for me, it was I had the virus. But I've spoken to I've actually had like several cyclists reach out to me who've had it and been in that same situation. But essentially you do intense exercise with some of the COVID. It can be any virus. It doesn't need to be COVID, but some virus in your system and some of the viruses in your heart, and then it causes inflammation. And in my case, I was very lucky in that it was just the lining of the heart rather than the heart muscle itself. So the heart muscle itself would be myocarditis, and that can be like very, very dangerous. And I've spoken to other cyclists and triathletes who've suffered from that, and they've been out of exercise for like, I think Ella Harris had to take more than 3 months of no exercise. It might have been 6 months, which is insane.
So that's the prescription, is literally stopping everything.
You need to let your heart recover. So you can't raise your heart rate. So you literally can't even go for like a walk. I spoke to I got advice from a world tour doctor, and he said to me, you can walk to the baker and the butcher, and that's it. He was like, baker and butcher and back, no more than that, for at least 3 weeks. And then you can start to do zone 2. So I did 3 weeks of nothing, and then building back by zone 2 first, not raising the heart rate above zone 2. And then after that, I got an all clear from a cardiologist who then did another echocardiogram. So that's like an ultrasound of your heart to check for inflammation. And he gave me the all clear to start doing efforts again. But I still waited he told me to wait another month after that to be able to push my heart rate up, because it's not worth the risk. It's too dangerous.
No, it's not. And then you reverse everything that you just did.
Exactly. Yeah. So you literally have to stop. And I actually have a friend in gravel racing who recently, Piotr, he also got diagnosed with pericarditis following, I think it was Unbound that he had a virus and he didn't know, and he raced with it. And yeah, he's been given at least 6 weeks of absolutely no exercises, the bare minimum to start recovery. It's not a fun thing to be diagnosed with.
It's a full reset too.
Yeah, I think we need to talk about more on, I think it's getting better, but I think there was a lot of like glory given to people that are racing injured or sick, like, oh my gosh, look at that, it's amazing. And that should not be normalized. You should rest, you should recover properly, because there are serious consequences, like hearing from you, getting a heart condition and having to take serious time off just because you pushed yourself.
I think rather than looking at that as somebody's got to take time off, they're hurt, it's being strong, actually doing this for yourself. But
I get it. Yeah, like they're pros, so it's hard. It's your job.
And it's disappointing. You plan your race calendar too, so it changes so many dynamics there and all the training you've put in.
I think it was crazy when I was actually resting, the Tour de France was on, and there were riders with COVID racing the Tour de France, like openly tested positive for COVID, that was still racing. And having had that diagnosis, I was just so shocked that they were being like allowed to do that. I just think if you've from my personal experience and from talking to other people who've gone through this, it's like the risk of doing any intense exercise with a virus in your system is absolutely not worth it. And I know so many people who just like, they'll push it. They're like a bit ill and they're like, oh, I don't want to miss out on training. The chance and the risk that you're going to push yourself way further back by not letting yourself recover properly is definitely not worth it.
Yeah, you hear that every time. No, just one more session, or I'll just push a little bit harder this day and then I'll rest. That one more could just be the last one or it before you have to do something all over again. It just compromises so many other aspects of your life, but I do feel like it's glorified that way. And it's not just in cycling, you feel like there's pressure on you too to perform.
And I knew that I wasn't okay on that first morning of migration, and I didn't feel awful, but I knew I'd had a fever in the middle of the night. But given the amount of resources and like my sponsors' money that had gone into that race, and I'm sure if I spoke to my sponsors, they wouldn't have told me to race, but like I felt like I should race, and it would have been crazy if I didn't do that race. So on reflection, I definitely don't regret racing, even though I did have a virus. But I think it's such a hard, I think that's an extreme situation, because like racing, migration, gravel races, like a huge amount of resources go into that race. You're in the middle of nowhere. Like it would be crazy to not race.
I raced the second edition. I think it was 2000.
Yeah. Oh, it was amazing, isn't it?
Incredible. And I saw your YouTube and some other people YouTube. This year was, I think, much, much, much harder because you guys had so much rain. My year was very dry, so it was still very tough, but doesn't compare to how tough yours was. The DNF rate was also much higher.
So I raced it this year and I raced it last year, and almost every stage took me about 2 hours longer this year than last year because of how much harder it was. And I was fitter. I was pushing higher power numbers every day, but the rain made it so that there was literally no moment of smooth gravel, to be honest. It was like ruts everywhere. It was so hard. It was so hard on your body. And yeah, like the DNF rate was unbelievably high. And a lot of people, because there were 2 courses this year, you could do a shorter version or a longer version. And like so many people on the second day were stepping down to the shorter version. It was a challenge to finish.
Yeah, very technical race.
Yeah, I've seen your posts on that migration is so much more challenging than maybe you expected. That's a heck of a race. And over 4 days. We did an episode with Michael Delagrange, and he was sharing about that. It's amazing how people take for granted the terrain over there and the riding. And that's one of the reasons they were bringing athletes over there to ride on their grounds and see just how challenging it really is. And did you just see they opened registration for 2025?
I did, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do it for 3rd year. It's a question. Oregon Trail's exactly the same timing, and you can't do, or it's like a few days after, but one can't do 2 5-4 day stage races. So I need to have a real think about which one I'm going to do. My heart does say maybe a 3rd year of migration, but I've also done it 2 years in a row, so maybe do something different.
Have you done Oregon before?
I've never done Oregon before. I've actually never been to Oregon before either, so it would be a cool adventure in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Something new. Kind of segueing into that is that I heard you do not do the same route twice. Is this true?
I would say it's like 90% true. It's true, but like every so often. Actually, no, it is true. I never do the same. I read like a research paper. This is like so sneaky, but I read a research paper about like happiness and how to like ways to like be happy. And it was about basically, what's the word? Hedonic adaptations. So like how we get used to certain things. Like say, for example, the first sports car you buy, you're super excited. You buy a second sports car and it's less exciting than the first one. If you had 100 sports cars, you don't really care. And like with cycling, if I was to ride the same route all the time, yes, I love cycling, but like the way to get over the hedonic adaptations is to add variety. So I change where I ride every time I ride. I change who I ride with a lot of the time. Like change which cafes I go to. I think, yeah, spice it up, change which like terrain I ride on, and I love it every time.
I actually went to your Strava and saved a few rides that you've done in Girona, because I'm new to Girona. I moved here 6 months ago. So on my Wahoo, I have a lot of like Maddy Gravel, Banioles, Maddy Road, a bunch of your routes.
I hope you enjoy them. I love a road route. I think also I'm quite a passionate route maker, so that comes into it as well. Like it's a bit of a sad passion, but I love to sit down and like plot a really different route, or like change a route, or like try a different combination of lanes or direction. And like even though I've ridden, I mean, my personal heat map around like south and west of London is insane, but I always try and like make it a little bit different. So yeah, well, I hope you enjoy my Girona routes. Like some of them are real good ones.
So far, so good.
Especially if they end up at a really good bakery.
Some I still have to tackle. The ones that it takes you more than 6-7 hours. I'm thinking if it takes her this long, I should add 2-3 more hours. So I need like a long day to do those.
I actually saw someone the other day. They did a ride on Strava in Girona, and they wrote the ultimate route. And I like looked at it. I was like, hold on, I recognize that route. I was like, that's definitely a Maddy.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like commented being like, this looks like a Maddy route. Like, yeah, full credit. We saw this from you. And they were like, literally the best Girona gravel route. And I was like, yeah, please give me credit.
Yeah, no, they are really, really good routes. I even took my husband in one of I think it's the road one, goes to St. Hilary's and back, some more climbing. And he also liked that. So giving you full credit on that one. So if you follow Maddy on Strava, you can trust all the routes are really good.
The only thing I wouldn't trust with me would be sometimes my road routes go a little bit off-road, and sometimes my off-road routes can get a little bit technical from time to time. But on the whole, I think I'm a pretty safe route. to follow.
There's definitely adventure involved.
You might have to hike your bike, but you'll hike your bike.
You hear that a lot when you actually have those portions, or it's just like little sections.
Not huge portions, but like the Tracker 360 this year had a hike a bike section that was pretty long. Like it was and really steep. Like it was a proper hike.
Wow.
What's been the most challenging, like migration, Tracker?
I'd say the most challenging race I've done is definitely migration. But I don't think there's a single hiker bike in migration.
But they change up those routes every year pretty much, or every so often. I know Unbound does that. You did Unbound last year too, right? And I saw that on your calendar.
Yeah, I did Unbound last year and I'm doing it again next year. Last year, I did not have a good day. We only just made it to sign on. We had a bit of a disaster in terms of getting there. So that was not ideal. And yeah, the girl I went with, she pulled out after 10K. We'd had such a bad lead up into it. So I didn't have the best experience, but I think I'm ready to face it again after a year's break.
Something common I hear about that race.
You built a strong presence in women's gravel community. How did it all start, or what do you think it was the most pivotal moment for you on the bike to date and getting to be such a strong presence in this community?
I actually don't really know when I became more of a presence in the community. I'd say it's probably been maybe since I started making YouTube videos that I've kind of built more of a following and kind of gained more of a presence, I'd say. And that kind of aligned with me focusing only on gravel with racing. So I think both things kind of happened at the same time. But yeah, I'd say kind of being outwardly spoken about being someone who specializes in gravel, which I don't think that many people seem to do. There are definitely more people now, but gravel racing seems to be kind of a lot of road races, secondary, they dip their toes in. And there's less people who are kind of committed to it and solely race gravel. So yeah, I'd say I've been racing only gravel for the past 2 years. Although to be fair, I did do a road race last year. Didn't have the best time, and I decided at that road race that was going to be my last road race.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's so much more technical too with gravel. There's a lot of aspects in there. I mean, it's quite different. You expend a lot of energy. I know you've said before, and it's got a different punchiness to it as far as road racing, and that's not where your body tends to go. You lean more towards the endurance aspect of just grinding through some trails. And
I'm definitely, when people refer to cyclists as diesel engines, I'm like a diesel engine. I have no kick. And that means that I find road racing incredibly unfair because people who aren't necessarily as fit can sit in the bunch and then kick at the end and they'll beat you in the race. Whereas gravel racing, I think, is a lot more honest. It is a lot harder. People get away with not pushing out the same amount of watts as other people. Yeah, you're going hard all day, and I really enjoy that effort. I like pushing my body. I like pushing myself physically and mentally. And I think that's another element where migration gravel race, an 8-hour race is not easy. A stage race, 4 stages in the middle of the Masai Mara in Kenya, not easy. But I really enjoy that element of pushing myself, which I think other cyclists maybe don't. Whereas road racing, to me, I don't find that kind of effort pushes myself in the same way. I don't want to call it boring, but there is an element where it can be seen as a little bit more boring. But also maybe it's because I'm really bad tactically.
Yeah, I can relate with the tactics part of it in that aspect. I think the gravel has a different feel in that way. How did you feel as far as when you started racing, and how was it different, the actual racing field, the women involved? Do you notice more camaraderie? Do you notice more of a tight-knit community within gravel than you do with road? How does that equate?
So I'd say, to me, there's quite a stark difference between people who are attracted to the gravel scene rather than the road scene. My experience of the gravel scene is a lot more camaraderie and outside. I mean, I was going to say outside of the racing, people are friends, but even in the racing, if I'm in a gravel race, I'm typically riding with people I know, and there are certain people who I really love riding with and I love racing with, and we chat to each other, we support each other in that racing, and yes, you're racing each other, we're competitive. But at the end of the day, you cross the finish line and you're all hugging. Whereas on the road, I mean, I've never raced on the road at a level beyond a domestic level, but domestically, there just is quite a lot of toxicity. And there feels like, I don't know whether it's the teams, I don't know whether it's maybe a British thing, I don't know if it carries across like on the continent, but like in the UK, it feels like there's like teams and like people talk about each other. There's like not nice atmosphere between different teams, and you're not going to cross the line and hug the person who won the race. Whereas like migration gravel race, there was one stage where me, Sarah, and Louise, we were all racing like head to head until the finish line, basically. We crossed that finish line. As soon as we crossed the finish line, we're laughing, we're hugging each other. Like it's completely different to like a road race.
You're celebrating each other and the effort. You just exactly know how it felt to go through. And on the road, it's amazing how quickly sometimes they forget.
Yeah, I don't know why it's like that. I come from triathlon and I stopped doing triathlon and started doing just gravel, and it's exactly the same if you just described. It's just so much more judgy, you know, and it's just a different vibe. Where with gravel, yeah, it is a competitive environment, but there's so much more camaraderie and celebrating together.
I think it needs to happen more, but you see it. It's not just women. I mean, you see it within the men's field.
Yeah, no, it's not a women thing. I think it's just, I don't know why it's different in each sport.
Ultra endurance, in that sense, from what we've seen, it's just plain and simple. It's a community where everybody just really gets along. It's not like you're just saying, good job, because you feel like you have to, because there's somebody taking a picture afterwards and, you know, this is your presence. You're actually genuinely happy for the person and celebrating them. I think that's really just beautiful, and it's authentic. And it looks like you really are having a good time doing what you love.
About women in cycling, is there anything that you personally would like to see more or less of?
I'd say in terms of women in cycling, I think it's having the same amount of exposure as men in cycling get. I think that there's still an inequality there. And like that's on the road as well as, like, I think gravel is actually better than on the road in terms of that kind of equality. And I love that with gravel this year, there's been a real focus on women having separate starts and us having our own races. And I think that's really important, because the men always get their own race. The men's race is never affected by women. Whereas women's racing, I've been in so many races where the result's been affected by women drafting men, especially like when it's planned and it's someone's boyfriend. It's the most frustrating thing. So yeah, I'd say that. But then also in terms of like exposure, and that is more on the road than gravel. I think gravel's pretty fair, and like the event organizers do give good exposure to both genders. Whereas on the road, like I think I find it frustrating to see for the women, like they're still not being paid anywhere near as much as the men are being paid, for example. But yeah, just generically, I think there is still a way to go in cycling, and it's a problem in a lot of sports, but I think it is a specific problem in cycling.
I agree with that too. I'd love to shine more of a light on that. I mean, I'm sure it's hard for these women too, because it's like you have to be careful what you say, because you're grateful for where it's come today, but it's still got so far to go, and you don't want to halt it by any means. But at the same time, yeah, look and listen, because we're here to stay. We're only going to get louder and stronger. And I love that in gravel, that's just welcome. And you can see that they celebrate women on a different level. They celebrate all genders on a different level. And I really love that. I think it's just a different feel, a different connection, you know, a different energy in general. So I have some fun questions to ask, because I know you're a foodie. Okay. What about the holidays?
We don't really do Thanksgiving. Christmas isn't that big in my family at all. So like, I'm not really big on the holidays, which is a shame. I definitely wish I was bigger on it. I actually don't know what I'm going to do for Christmas this year. But yeah, no, I don't know where I'm going to be either, because I'm like renting a room in Girona for winter, but I probably will come home for Christmas. But yeah, I'm a big foodie, but I end up cooking Christmas dinner, so I'm not really into roast. So I think last year I made fresh pasta on Christmas Day.
Love it. Change it up. I think you can also be loose on that. I know, because everybody wants to come to my house, but I got my go-to turkey that I brine, and it always comes out like awesome. I mean, I love to cook, but you complain like, why do I have to host every year? Why doesn't somebody else do it? But then if they don't do it, you're like, I should have done it. Yeah. It's that control thing too. You want it to be good. And I've heard you love to micromanage that way too with cooking.
No, definitely. I have to be the one cooking pretty much most of the time.
Does your girlfriend cook? Is she any good?
Every so often she's not bad, and like she can definitely follow a recipe, but it's not a passion. So like if I've got like a manic day or something, sometimes I'll be like, is there any chance you can cook tonight? And she'll always say yes. But I typically cook just because I love doing it.
Is there a go-to dish that you do more on the daily basis?
I'd say my go-to is just to make fresh pasta. Like if I've got someone coming over for dinner, I'll make pasta from scratch and then like some sort of sauce for it. But yeah, I'd say I don't make fresh pasta every day, but I do it probably at least once a week. And then I think it's just I love the process. I just love the process of like rolling it out, cutting it out, and it tastes so much better than shop bought pasta.
I watched one of your videos and I was like, God, she makes it look so easy. But you're sitting there talking, doing this. I'll be like, it's going to be all over the place for me. But I'm sure it wasn't perfect the first time. How long did it take you to feel like you got there?
Well, I started making pasta in the first COVID lockdown, so that would have been 2020. And I'd say for like the past couple of years, I've been pretty comfortable doing it. So it definitely did take some time. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that I've been making pasta for 4 years.
What's your favorite?
To be fair, my favorite is pappardelle, just because it's the easiest and it's really satisfying when you cut it and then you like unroll it. But yeah, I think I made agnolotti. I'm trying to remember what it was called. So good. I used to make gnocchi a lot, and I would make gnocchi out of various things. Like I've made like parsnip gnocchi, like sweet potato gnocchi. Sweet potato gnocchi is really good.
I love gnocchi.
And that's probably so good for training.
If you're making it from scratch because you know exactly what's going into it, like you're chucking.
I mean, isn't that the point of controlling a lot of the food too? Is that help a lot of the aspect of it is just knowing what you're getting and what you're putting into your body. That's one of the things with fueling. That's why it's so important for us to invest in that in ourselves, make our own foods rather than processed or packaged.
I also think like one, it tastes better if you make it yourself.
100%.
But yeah, it's kind of that like it's gonna have much better like vitamins, minerals, all of that if you're buying food from scratch and like the freshest ingredients you can get, the highest quality ingredients you can get. I don't earn much as a cyclist, but I spend all of my spare money on food because I think that's like the most important thing. Like you're investing in your own personal health to like eat properly, and like I feel so much better eating good food. Like my skin's so much better. Like everything is. I just feel so much healthier when I eat well.
It's ultimate investment.
Yeah,
and it makes you happy, and that just comes out. That's what I would expect for you to spend your money on. I would expect it to be on like bikes and your food and your trips.
Yeah, it's on travel. Luckily, I don't have to spend any money on bikes, luckily. But that used to be my biggest money spender. And it's basically just travel and food. That's where all my money goes.
One of the things that I recognized about you from the beginning, too, was I say Velocio. How the heck do you even pronounce it?
I pronounce it Velocio. And I think officially it's
Velocio. I was saying Velocio, too. And then somebody was saying Velocio to me. And I'm like, have I been saying it wrong all this time?
Well, so I asked like the head of like Europe at Velocio, and she said I pronounced it right, but she said some people go Velocio. She was like, it's how you want to pronounce it, and I was like, no, there needs to be an answer. I can't have that kind of gray space. We need a concrete answer.
I agree. So what's your partnership with them?
So it's at the moment for 2024 it was Ribble, Velocio and Panarisa. They're amazing, like in terms of my relationship with them. The quality of the kit is incredible, which is why I actually went for them. The quality of the kit is so important. I never have to think about, will I have enough kit or will I have the right kit? And yeah, even like the other day, I was like, can I just have some more white socks because all my white socks are dirty? And they're like, yeah.
I love it. What's your favorite bib? Because I've been using it forever. I love the concept, but the material sometimes breaks down easily. The Luxe fabric is more durable.
I love no seam. Like I love the fact that there's no seam.
I love the mesh in the front. That's nice. I used to wear the Signature before they came out with the Luxe. I've been a Velocio person forever.
I've been lucky enough to have Albion, but I did try Velocio because Debbie won't stop talking about, and I love it. But I also, a friend of mine told me, I don't know if it's true, that it was designed by women for women.
They started and they were just doing race apparel at first. And then they are partnered with SRAM, but that was only like a couple years ago. And it was a lot more small. And I don't know who they stopped working with them, but I used to deal with a girl who was a pro racer, and she was my go-to. And we would just go back and forth when I had orders. And it was like so awesome to see how they have real riders and using the product, working with them. I mean, that's the way it should be. Luckily now they'll send you all this great stuff and everything's like fits great. So it's wonderful. You don't have to go through that whole trial and error phase of like wasting money. There's a lot of products out there.
I had big issues with bib shorts in the past, and that's where like I built that relationship with Velocio because I was having an issue with bib shorts that I was having to wear because I was on like a team that had a kit, and I ended up just wearing the Velocio black shorts with like the team jersey because I was getting like saddle sores all the time. Like the quality of the bibs just wasn't right. And I also, like in long races, I need to be able to pee easily. So the Velocio bibs, they're like ease of pee. Oh, so good.
God, right? That's the best. Even before with the zipper. They perfected that because the zipper used to wear down eventually, and then you could see kind of it would get a little more see-through. But now that you just pull it down, it's even easier. It's so much better, and you don't have to deal with any issues. They were already like doing that for a long time. Now other people are doing that, but it's like they've been doing all these things for a long time, just paying attention to what women need, making the chamois bigger. You know how that's one of the things I noticed. I don't know if that also helped probably with your saddle sores. It's not just that, it's the material they use. It's more sensitive, so you don't get the same type of saddle sores, but the coverage, that's what I noticed right away.
I think it's also the stitching, because I was getting saddle sores exactly where the seam was and the stitching, whereas like the Velocio stitching is so subtle.
Get back to your journey. Like, I know you're off season now and you're going to go to your trip to Cancun and relax, and we're going to blink and it's going to be 2025 season. Are there any lessons, anything that you want to do different from 2024? What are your dreams and goals for 2025?
That's a really good question. I feel like one thing I've learned is the kind of importance of like picking key races and like choosing which ones are your A races, and then really like working towards them. And if I'm doing more races on top of that, which undoubtedly I will, because I like to race a lot, for one, I get to do more trips, get good content, get to share more about different races, and get the experience. But like at the end of the day, I can't peak for 18 races across the season, so I need to really pick carefully which ones are my A races, and like not be too emotional or tied to the B and the C races that maybe I don't care so much about, and I need to like not expect a performance when I'm not training to peak at those. So I think this year there were a couple of races where like it wasn't a target race for me, and I knew that. But even though I knew that, and I was working with my coach, and that race, then like maybe I had a couple of sessions very close to that race, and I was training around that race. It's just like not then getting down about maybe not having the best result in those races, and actually just focusing on, these are my target races. These are the races that I think I'm going to perform best at, and I'm going to put kind of my training into. And yeah, I think that's the main thing. I also think I've learned that I think I've got a strength in stage racing, and I kind of learned that 2 seasons ago. And maybe that's where I should kind of be throwing my A races at. I found a couple of stage races I really want to target next year.
What do you like about that? Is that something that just feels good, like that you can build upon it? Each day can be so different.
I think I recover quite well, and my endurance is my strength. So I think it's just like that's where my strengths lie, is like the repetitive day after day. And you've also got the mental aspect. The other element is I'm quite good at like fueling and recovering after a race. So like when it comes to migration, for example, half of the race and like doing well in the race is like looking after yourself every day and prepping for the next day. And I think I'm quite good at like being quite militant. Like I finish the race, I have a protein shake, I eat a huge portion of carbs and some protein. Like I think about, okay, I need to sort my kit out for the next day, I need to sort my bike out for the next day. And I go to bed with everything set out, my carbs measured out, my gels completely like lined up, and I'm ready to go. The next morning I'm up, I'm like, I eat the right breakfast. I think there's an element of like being really on top of it that makes you good at like stage racing as a gravel privateer. And that's, yeah, I think that's something that really suits me.
It sounds like it too. I like hearing this. This is hugely positive. I don't know if you can share on that a little bit more before we wrap up and let you go. It's so wonderful to hear the positivity of planning everything out. You're not restricting it all. We hear that from so many women in sports. It's just fueling your body. You need this. This is what I need. This is how I perform well. And taking stock and like enjoying the process of measuring things out for your body that's going to give you more strength and more power the next day to keep doing this, to keep cycling because you love it. But just the positivity that goes in this, you don't see that a lot with women. They might say one thing, but just celebrating your body in a wonderful, beautiful way for what it does for us in general.
Yeah, totally. I think I've got a really good relationship with food at the moment in terms of like food as a source of fuel. And I think that's like massively changed my cycling. Like when I've like worked out the how to use food and like different macros in different parts of my training and like pre-training, post-training, like when to eat a certain amount of carbs, how to carb load, how to recover. And I think viewing food in that way is like such a kind of performance tool can completely transform your cycling experience. And it changes how you feel on the bike as well. And you feel so much better and then you're enjoying it more. And then you see the results. So yeah, no, definitely. I think it's, and like you also, like I enjoy food. So like when I eat the food and I'm like I do think about macros and I do plan out to a certain degree what I'm going to be eating around racing and stuff like that. But then at Migration Gravel Race, you can't control what food they're going to give you. So then it just becomes, that's a whole part of the challenge as well. And I love that kind of thing as well. Like you show up and like one day there was no rice and I was like, damn, there's no rice, there's no pasta. Like I need to find my carb source.
How do you find a carb source? What did they have?
Oh, I think that day, maybe they had ugali or they had, which is like a maize meal, or they had potato. And I'm not really into potato, but like I had to have the potato.
You had to eat it.
Yeah, and then I think there was some like chapatis and I was like, do you know what? I'm going to have like, there isn't the carb sources of my preference. Like normally I go number one is rice, easiest around a race. Number two would be pasta. And they didn't have rice or pasta one evening. And I was like, I have to eat carbs. That is the number one priority here. And yeah, I think that whole element of like, you have to be a bit smart as well. And I quite like that. Like there's more to it than just, like you have to do some thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I love rice as well. It's my go-to, savory or sweet. And every time we travel to race, me and my husband, he's always like, let's bring the sushi rice. You need to make rice cakes for me. I'm like, chill, dude, chill. If we cannot make it, we'll find something else. There are other sources. But I wanted to touch on, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but on your post on Instagram with the internet trolls, always giving comments on women's bodies positively or negatively, because I don't want to say positively because it's not positive, but some, they're trying to give you a compliment, but it's kind of dirty.
You don't know if they're being sarcastic and funny, but either way, there's no inflection when you send these messages. And they're not your friends, so you don't know what they mean.
Oh, 100%. I think I've had a few, since having a social media presence or like having a YouTube channel, I've definitely had a few comments that haven't been put. Like I've had a lot of positive comments, and overall, I'd say the internet is a really positive space. But like I have had some negative comments, and I think that when you put yourself out there, that's potentially going to happen. But I would say like commenting on like bodies in general, and like I think this is both genders, but specifically female athletes, I think it's such a sensitive topic. And like someone commented on my YouTube saying, I actually can't remember the comment. It was something like, oh, looks like you've put on weight. I see you gained some weight there. And like he was correct. I have gained a bit of weight in the past few weeks or in the past month. It's not wrong. And like I think from my perspective, it doesn't feel nice for someone to comment on something like that, because you don't feel like that's something that necessarily people are going to notice, one, but also if they notice it, that they're going to say something. And like I put up a post on Instagram, I like reflected on it, thought about it for a bit. I was like immediately upset because like it was a comment.
That's the natural reaction. It's normal to feel that way. Like I do feel this way. Maybe I have, but wow, I didn't expect that.
Or maybe you were planning to gain some weight.
And like actually I had I hadn't necessarily planned to gain weight, but I'd had some time off the bike because of the pericarditis. And then I actually actively was thinking about the rest of my season and how most of my races were pretty flat. So like I didn't need to think really carefully about my weight. And it's not that I think super carefully about my weight anyways, but my races were going to be flat for the rest of the year. So I was kind of like, this isn't a concern that I've put on a tiny bit of weight. And as I mentioned in my post, like earlier this year, I'd missed a few periods, and I know how important it is, like as an athlete, to like steer clear of like red S and like to like really having a period. I mean, I speak to a lot of female cyclists, and I know that it's like super, super common that people don't have a period. And it's definitely something that people don't talk about enough and like don't have enough knowledge about. It's being spoken about more, but like I was aware at that point that maybe that I needed to like really think about my fueling and my nutrition to make sure that that didn't happen and that I could kind of like solve for that. So putting on a tiny bit of weight in response to that like completely makes sense. I've like ever spoken about on social media before, which is what I put in my post. Like I personally don't feel the need to put as part of my identity some like having struggled with like an eating disorder in the past or like disordered eating. And I feel like someone on the internet doesn't necessarily know the entire story or the entire picture. And that is the problem with people commenting on the internet, and especially like people commenting negatively because they don't know you. And I've had people who I feel like the problem with having, and I think this is specific to a YouTube channel, I think it's less of a problem on Instagram, but long form content, because you're talking to a camera and you're vlogging, people feel like they know you or they feel like you're friends sometimes. And like I've met people in real life and they've like reacted to me like we're friends, and I don't know who they are. Like, yes, amazing, you watch my content, but like that's a one-way thing. Like you know me and I don't know you. And I think that's something that I've had to get used to. And it does sometimes result in things like this, like someone commenting. And I actually don't think he did mean what he said in that he noticed that I put on weight. Because when someone commented back saying that that's not a kind thing to say, he said, I didn't mean to be kind or disrespectful. And he actually commented on my YouTube video I uploaded yesterday saying, I love your videos. Like, I think it's a supporter of my content. And I think he didn't mean it in a mean way. And I've seen this happen to other people with people commenting on their weight. It just is something that I don't think you should ever comment on. And like I've done, say, for example, the Tracker 360. After the Tracker 360, I looked pretty emaciated, not this year, last year, because I ended up vomiting all my way around. So I looked awful after that race. And I vomited from, I think it was from 80 kilometers into 360K. So you can imagine at the end of that, I did not look healthy. And like I came home and I remember like a few people made comments about how lean I looked or like how, and like in a way of concern. But even then, like, yes, maybe helpful to be like, I'm a bit concerned you look quite slim, but it's in response to me being dehydrated in a race. Like I am in a great place with my nutrition and like I will sort that out. Like I'm sure I'll be fine next week. Let me eat some pastries and I'm going to be okay.
It's really hard for especially women, I think, for us to accept our bodies. I know so many people that for me, they look perfect and they still complain or they have some parts that they don't love about their body. So we are all working so hard as a community of women on body, not just body positivity, but accepting, our own shape, whatever it is. So I find it hard personally, and I don't appreciate, even though when sometimes it comes from a good place, to comment on a woman's body.
No, I totally agree. And it's like, we can't change our natural body shape. Like I have a pretty huge rib cage and like, as I said, a short torso. I've got a bit of a weird body shape, but like, I can't help that. There's nothing I can do to change that. And like, actually having huge rib cage means I've probably got pretty big lungs, and that helps me with my cycle. And my short torso means that comparatively my legs are really long for my body. So like
more power.
Yeah. So all these things, we can't change it. And it's something where like everyone just has to get to a point where they're happy and comfortable with their own bodies, and people have different journeys with that. And I think that's why weight specifically, and I know it is a specific thing with cycling, because cycling can be quite weight focused, or like people can talk about weight quite a lot with cycling, but
there's nothing left to mystery. They see everything exposed pretty much. We're in Lycra.
That's very true. I think it should be something that people kind of need to focus on less, and like the conversation should be more about like fueling for performance and like
agreed. Actually, oh my god,
I know quite a few cyclists who've had like problems with eating disorders, and then they've come out of that recovered and they eat really well and their power numbers are like sky high. And then even if you do watts per kilo, way higher, way higher. Like it's so common. And it's not just about watts per kilo at the end of the day anyways, but pure watts in gravel make a huge difference. So actually being skinny really doesn't do you well. And if you crash, and I know I put like a joke up being like, I bounce when I crash. Like I crashed on the weekend. Every time I've not broken something. And I think I put that down to like, obviously I've been quite lucky and sometimes people can be unlucky and break just with the way they hit the ground or whatever. But my bone density is good because of what I'm eating.
It's exactly, it has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, we need to get to a place where, like you said in the beginning, you have a good relationship with food because you learn what to eat, when to eat to fuel your body instead of thinking calories or gaining weight or losing weight. Just feel your body right and you don't have to think about.
I agree. Talking about body positivity and not commenting on things like weight. And like you said, rather than focusing on that, why not focus on someone's performance? This might be TMI, but when you get your period, you feel this surge of energy. I don't know what it was. It would feel like almost like a release, and I would feel so strong those days. I don't know what happens.
Because before you get your period, you have higher levels of progesterone. Progesterone, it's the hormones that get you more sleepy, more tired, and estrogen is the happier hormone. And once you get your period, your progesterone goes lower, and it's the highest level of testosterone that you have in your bodies when you have your period. So actually, if you don't have any cramps or anything like that, you don't feel crappy hormonally, it's actually great to race on your period, for example.
Yeah, that was always like my best day. I'd feel like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. And I'm not
you
even
get your energy back.
Right. You just felt like, wow, I'm alive again.
What I find really hard though is because I similarly like experience like absolute changes over the month in terms of performance based off my menstrual cycle. And like what I find so hard is like I might choose a race and be like, that's gonna be my target race, and then it falls in the week before my period, which is where my legs feel like absolute crap. And it's so hard because like you might be like, I really wanted to peak at that race, but I just can't because like hormonally I'm not in a great place then. And I think as a female athlete, that's something that we maybe don't talk about enough. And I'm always like amazed by athletes who don't seem to have inconsistencies. Like you look at Lotte Kopecky, like when does she have the week before her period?
A bad day.
Every day. True. But yeah, like I feel often like my personal inconsistencies in racing is down to like where I am in my menstrual cycle. And it is something that's really hard. And like, I mean, I'm very open with my coach. And I know not everyone has this relationship with their coach, but we don't do specific sessions the week before my period because that's like it's not gonna go down well. I'm not gonna finish the session. I'm gonna be upset because I'm really moody and I'm really low, and then I'm gonna feel worse about myself, and like the end result is just not productive. But yeah, it's a really interesting conversation.
That's cool though that you have that honesty with your coach.
Yeah,
both ways. I think coaches also have to be interested and know the menstrual cycle of an athlete.
It's not just, you're not just saying an excuse so that you can take it easy that way. I mean, this is real physics here.
No, totally. And I think you need to have a relationship with a coach where you feel like you can have those conversations. And your coach needs to bring that up. And then I think that's something also with like athletes not having periods or like cyclists not having periods. Like coaches should be checking that you do have a period. Like is such a red flag when someone doesn't have a period. And yet I think that is quite common still. And it's something that like coaches should be aware of. And yeah, like I'm completely honest with my coach. Like earlier this year when I was like, my period hasn't come. And then we were like, maybe let's look, like, what have I done? Okay, I've done a really big training block. And he's like, were you eating, like, let's think about how much carbohydrates you were eating like around your training. Like maybe it's that you weren't eating enough carbs, like intra-fueling or like pre-fueling training. And I think, yeah, you need to be able to have those honest conversations because otherwise like you could end up really affecting like your long-term fertility, for example, and your immune system.
That's so true because that's another topic of racing is women feel like they have a shelf life with racing, especially pro racing, because once you start having children, it changes your body, it changes your dynamic, your training, your levels. They think your focus has changed. It's different. It's funny. All these guys can have their kids That never comes into it.
That's also a conversation with being a privateer. Like, I don't have a maternity clause in any of my contracts, of course. Whereas, like, I think women on the road now do have that. And that's obviously something that's changed. And I wonder whether that would ever come into any privateer contracts. Probably not, because they're like year-long contracts. You don't get multi-year. Like, I got some 2-year contracts, but that's very unusual. You don't get
But it takes 9 months to have a child. And no matter what, we're women. And this is part of who we are, that whether we want to have children or not, it doesn't mean we're going to, but it should be inclusive to all women as far as allowing this.
No, totally. I'd have to retire if I was to like want to have a child myself, unless I utilize my girlfriend. I think that would be the solution.
Yeah. Good plan. I wish I could have told that to my husband. You carry him. It's tough, but it's just as rewarding as winning a race. Yeah, they teach you so many lessons in life. It's amazing. I know you have a sister, right?
Yeah, I've got a younger sister.
She doesn't race or ride. Does she ride at all?
No, she doesn't. And I've like tried so hard to convince her to start riding, but she's not keen. I think I tried too hard. And actually, to be fair, the critical moment was, so my dad is into cycling, and for Father's Day, it was probably about 4 years ago, I just kind of got into cycling. I put my sister on my winter bike and I plotted us a route, like a casual route with no hills. And I took her up a really, really big hill to a cafe, and she's never got on a bike since.
You scared the shit out of her.
It was a really, really steep hill. And like on reflection, it was cruel, and I really should have made a flat route, but
that's hilarious. Thank goodness she's your sister. She still loves you.
She does.
God, that's funny.
I'm trying to get her to come to maybe a race or two this year as like a kind of photographer / videographer. We'll see. I'm chatting to her at the moment, but she's very adventurous and loves like being involved. And like this year, she obviously, like, I don't know if you've seen the bike that she illustrated for me.
No, I didn't. Do you have it posted somewhere, or is it on Patreon?
Yeah, it's on Instagram, and actually Roulette did an article about it. So she
amazing.
She's an illustrator. She hand illustrated a frame for me. So my bike is like hand illustrated by her, which is really, really cool.
That is special. Wow. Do you realize this? This is huge, Maddy, too. I mean, is this all also blow your mind sometimes, that you just like, I can't believe what I'm doing and I'm getting paid to be a pro cyclist?
Oh, it's really crazy, because I only started cycling 6 years ago. So sometimes I'm like, I only got a bike 6 years ago. And like, yeah, I get to sometimes when I'm traveling somewhere, I'm like, oh, I'm actually like, this is kind of my job now, to like travel and race.
I mean, as long as it's still fun, and it seems like I don't think you'd be doing it if it wasn't fun.
I actually, there's barely ever a moment where I'm like, this feels like, I'd say like maybe the hardest thing is like sorting sponsorship arrangements and stuff like that. Like that's probably the hardest part of the job. Like logistics, stuff goes wrong. But yeah, aside from that, I just love riding my bike. So it's very easy to get on the bike every day.
Well, we love to watch your journey. We definitely love the YouTube, all the cooking tips. So keep that going. It's been great talking to you. Really appreciate your time before your off-season trip, fitting us in. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Maddy.
Yes,
Thanks.
I appreciate this so much. Enjoy your vacation and your holiday season.
Thanks so much.
That's all for today's episode. We want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. Your support means everything to us. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Feel free to share your thoughts and feedback. We love hearing from you.